Hi everyone, this is Brian with Anderson Pens, and today I want to talk about the various sailor nib sizes. Let's take a look. Okay, today we're going to talk about the 7 standard sailor nib sizes. Unlike other brands that offer you a fine, medium, or broad, or maybe an extra fine, fine, medium, broad, Sailor gives you a number of options on most of their pens, so you can choose the exact nib width that is right for you. There are 7 standards, and there's actually an 8th one we'll talk about in a little bit. But for the most part, you have 7 options. You have extra fine, fine, medium fine, and medium. So the medium fine is in between a fine and a medium. A broad, a nib called the zoom, and a music nib. So we're going to go through and we're going to do some writing samples of all 7 of these, and then we're going to talk about them, and we're going to talk about an 8th one as well. Okay, let's start with the extra fine. Now, as you're probably aware, Japanese pens have a tendency to run finer than their Western counterparts. Sailor's obviously no different. Very, very fine nibs. So if you like something fine, this pen can deliver it. Now, one thing to note, the 7 standard Sailor nib sizes are all preceded on the marking with an H. They're all marked on the side of the nib, on the left side, and it'll be H dash and then the marking. And H stands for hard. There's no softness, there's no flex. So as you can see, that's a pretty fine line. We're going to move on to the fine now. As you can see, it's a little bit broader. And Sailor is known for having very smooth nibs, even when they're very fine. I'll mark this fine. Now, perhaps the most popular nib that we see here, the medium fine, just because it's in between a fine and a medium, you can see it's a hair wider than the fine. Moving on to the medium. Again, a little bit wider. You can see how we're progressing from extra fine. And probably the second most favorite nib option and my preferred choice, the broad. More like a Western medium, but it puts down a good amount of ink. I think it's excellent for everyday use. Then we come to the 2 more unusual nib options that Sailor includes as a standard. Now the zoom, and if you don't know what the zoom is, it's a very interesting nib. It's quite broad. As you can see, it's much broader than broad. But the beauty of this nib is you can get line variation based on the angle of the pen. So if I rotate the pen upward, you can see I get a fine line. And as I increase the angle, I get a much broader line. So you can get a varying degrees based on how you hold the pen. This may or may not be useful to you, but like I say, the broad at a normal writing angle is quite nice if you like a very broad nib, and then occasionally if you need to do something a little thinner, you do have the option. Now, if you have a super broad nib on another brand, you can't do that. And the last of the 7 is the music. The music is not quite as broad as the zoom, but as you can see, the downstrokes are broad and the horizontal strokes are a little bit thinner. So you can make your music notes, fill in the note head, and still get a nice thin line for the stem. Now, unlike other brands, Sailor uses 2 tines, 1 slit for their music nib instead of a 3 tine, 2 slit approach. Now, there are benefits to this. One I see is that if you have a need for a nib to be ground and you want to start with as broad as possible, you may want to start with a music nib if you want a medium or a broad that's adjusted, that's ground. With the Sailor, you can do that easily. The other advantage of having 2 tines and 1 slit is there's less to get misadjusted. If you accidentally bump it or somebody else uses your pen, you still only have 2 tines to adjust. You don't have to worry about that pesky middle tine that occasionally gets out of alignment. Now, I mentioned that there was an 8th nib, and up until recently, this was part of the B-spoke line, and then it was discontinued. Well, this year, in 2015, they came back with this as a regular production item, and this is the Saibi-Togi. This is a 0.12 millimeter super extra fine nib. So I'm going to write on top of the extra fine here. It's very, very fine. In fact, you can see I'll write in between here. And some people may perceive it as being a little bit scratchy, but the trick is you need to use very little pressure to get this to work properly. Very interesting pen. It actually does come with a special tool to clean the tines because it can grab some of your paper. Looks like I had something in there, but now it's writing better. It can grab some of your paper if you have a fibrous paper that you're using. So it's very, very fine. So if you have a need for your mathematician or chemist, or you're making very small characters, the Saibi-Togi will be the pen that with the finest nib in the Sailor lineup. So there you have it, the 7 different Sailor nib sizes. Be sure to check us out online at AndersonPens.com, in the store, or at any of a number of pen shows nationwide.